Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 12th of March 2025. I'm Councillor Ian Massey and I'm the convener of this committee. And I'll introduce you to the top table. On my far left is Councillor Grant Stewart, my vice convener, Miss Audrey Brown, Democratic Support Officer, and Mr Jeff Fogg, Legal Manager. On my right is Mr Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mr Sean Panton, Team Leader Major Application and Enforcement, and Mr Paul Williamson, Team Leader Local Applications. And as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during consideration of any item, when you return, you are unable to vote on that item. This also means that if a member loses their internet connection during consideration of an item, they should not vote on that item. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the meeting, or if you have lost your connection and are therefore unable to vote on the item. And whilst we are operating as a hybrid meeting for the proceedings today, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box to attract my attention, which all members should have access to. Q for questions, C for comment. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and attendance of those in the chamber and online. Over to you, Miss Brown.
Members, we have two apologies today, convener. We have apologies from Councillor Richard Waters with Councillor Eric Drysdale substituting, and apologies from Bailey Mike Williamson with Councillor Michelle Frampton substituting. We've got two members who are online today, so I'll ask them to confirm that they are present. We have Councillor Frampton online.
Present.
And Councillor James.
Good morning, Audrey, online.
Thank you. Everybody else is present in the chambers.
Thank you for that. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I have a financial and personal interest in item 524, it's the last item of the day, and I'll leave the chamber when that's being discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Item 3, the minutes. Can we agree the minutes of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 12th of February 2025? Thank you. Deputations. Can I ask the committee if you agree to hear deputations on item 511, 521, 522 and 523? Thank you. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the deputations and members of the public watching today. Your request to speak has been granted. You will be called to the lectern as we reach the relevant item on the agenda and be invited to make your deputation by the vice convener. This will be followed by a period of time for questions from members. It's requested that the content of your deputation is kept relevant to the planning considerations in relation to the item of business being discussed. Please also ensure that when you're answering questions, your response remains relevant and direct to the questions asked. Move on to item 5, which is applications for determination and major applications. And the first item on the agenda today is the formation of a 49.9 megawatt energy storage facility comprising of 24 battery storage container units, 2 switch rooms, welfare unit, substation, ancillary equipment, formation of vehicle access and track, boundary treatments, landscaping and associated works at land 260 metres southwest at Tippermore, Perth. And to introduce the report is Mr Panton.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. So as stated, the first major application on the agenda today is for a battery storage facility near Tippermore, Perth. The committee has recommended to refuse the application for reasons mentioned within the reports in front of you. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further and expand upon the recommended reasons for refusal. On the screen, we can see the location of the site. The site is approximately 800 metres to the east of Tippermore and to the immediate south of the C410 road. The site is currently in agricultural use and measures approximately 1.11 hectares. Next slide, please. We now have an extract of the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2, which shows the Perth Greenbelt. The red star denotes the location of the site, and as seen, this is fully within the Perth Greenbelt. Reason 1 for refusal in the reports before you is because the proposal is considered to result in a level of visual intrusion, which would have a detrimental impact on the character and landscape setting of the Greenbelt. Members should note that there are allowances within the Greenbelt policy for essential infrastructure, which this proposal qualifies as. However, this particular site in the Greenbelt is not considered to be appropriate due to the level of visual intrusion that would occur. Next slide, please. Here we have a proposed site plan. The proposal comprises 24 containerised batteries, 6 transformers and inverters, a switch room, a site supply transformer, a site welfare unit and a DNO substation. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed plans for the DNO substation. As seen, this will appear as a small building measuring approximately 5.5 metres in width and 6.6 metres in length. The maximum height, excluding the satellite dish, is 4.2 metres. Next slide, please. This plan shows a standard battery container elevation for which 24 are proposed. As seen, they are similar in appearance to a standard storage container. Next slide, please. The plan now shows the proposed switch room. You can see here that the switch room is slightly elevated from ground level. This is partly to account for the associated floods risk of the site. Members should note that reason 2 for refusal in the reports before you is in relation to flood risk, as it has not been suitably demonstrated that there is an operational need for essential infrastructure on this site which is at known risk of flooding. The proposal is therefore considered contrary to Policy 22 of National Planning Framework 4. I'll now take members through a series of recent photographs taken on my site visit last month. This first photograph shows the location of the site, denoted by the pink arrow, when viewed from the C410 exiting Tibbermore. You can see here that there is an existing residential property in close proximity to the site. Next image, please. The next photograph shows the site, which is the green field to the right of the road. The yellow arrow denotes another residential property which is beyond the site to the east. Next image, please. This photograph shows the development site when looking south from the C410. As seen, there is virtually no containment to this site, and as such, its development would have significant landscape impacts. This is therefore recommended reason 3 for refusal in the reports before you. Last image, please. This final photograph shows the site when looking back towards Tibbermore along the C410. Again, your attention is drawn towards the lack of containment of the site and the prominence of it when viewed from the road, thus eroding this greenbelt location. I would also point out that the nearest substation for connection is approximately 2.5 kilometres away from the site, so it is not considered that this site is the most appropriate to be developed. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. We do have deputations on this, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Mr. Wood and objector to the application? Good morning, Mr. Wood. As you're aware, you have 5 minutes, and whenever you feel comfortable start, I'll start the clock, and the red light will go on the next time when I switch my microphone off. But in your own time.
Press 1, that one. Is that correct? Start again. Good morning, Convener. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm really representing partially a subcommittee of Methven Community Council, which has been set up by the council specifically to oppose the industrialisation of Tibbermore. You should be aware that there's also a major battery storage site and also a solar panel site on either side of the village of Tibbermore, and local residents are gravely concerned about the implications for the village and for the area. The reason today that I would like to catch up with you is that there were a number of items in Sean's very excellent report, an excellent presentation, which I felt was very balanced, and we were very pleased to read that. And we would wish to support the council's rejection of this rejection of this proposal, and that the battery storage site should not come to Tibber Moor. What I'd like to do is point out a couple of additional items which are not currently clear in Sean's report. It was a very good report, but let me just put a few corrections to you. The first of these corrections is that under item 11 in Sean's report, it says that there were 65 letters sent out to local residents. Can I just confirm for you that as a local resident who's been at Tie and Strew on the eastern end of the site for some 37 years now, I'm well aware of the neighbourhood and the local people. There are 9 properties in total dotted around this site, 9 in total, of which I've knocked every door. Nobody on the site actually received any correspondence whatsoever from the proposed developers. Nothing. We were left out. I'm sure this was accidental. I think also what you should all be aware of is the fact that the original advertising for this site, completed by Gray Consultancies, sent a flyer out through the consultation exercise, which is the first time I and many of the other villagers picked it up. The flyer was headed Boroughmuir Battery Storage Site. Boroughmuir. If you ask anybody in Tibber Moor what relevance Boroughmuir has got to Tibber Moor, we haven't a clue. We haven't a clue. However, on further exploration, I've discovered, speaking to colleagues who were in the electrical industry, that the Boroughmuir substation, 2.5 kilometres away, was in fact the target for these developers. That's what they were aiming for. So there was nothing to tell us that this was really in Tibber Moor. No direct correspondence, no knocking on the doors. Gray Consultancy, when we spoke to them, advised us that in fact a number of tests had been done around the site to check for the sound. Obviously 24 shipping containers running night and day with fans and alternators lifting the power on site give a constant hum and a buzz day and night. No microphones were attached to any of the properties. The sounds were taken somehow by magic, but we were told, in fact, the properties were individually tested for sound levels. Nobody tested the sounds where we were. They also told us that hydrologists would be checking the flooding. I've been there for 37 years, and since 2015, I've been writing to the council and currently have an outstanding Freedom of Information request, which is now being considered by the Information Commissioner. Reason being, because the council were very, very slow in responding to my request about lifting the level of the road over the one culvert, which empties the water from this area. It floods annually. It's not a 1 in 200 year event. It is an annual event. It floods the road to a depth of 18 inches. It floods my garage area. This has been missed out in terms of the understanding by SEPA, I suspect, because we've gone for NFP4 planning, which is giving you a green card to avoid the issues of flooding to residential property. At the other end of the site, Peel Cottages, which Sean's photograph showed you, are also subject to flooding. This is not from the field itself, but it's from the hill behind the field. And I have the same problem at Tie and Strew at the eastern end of the site, where the water coming down from the farmland above, all from Duplin land, comes down as a result of the additional drainage that's been put in field drainage across the hill. I've seen the developments over the last 37 years. I can assure you that the SEPA information about 200-year flood risk is fundamentally wrong. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Mr. Wood, thank you for your deputation. Would you be willing to take questions from members? Okay, if you hang fire, members, could you populate the chat function? And Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Wood. At the beginning, you mentioned the site regarding a solar farm and another battery park. Is that already in existence, or is it just in its planning stage?
Again, yes, it is a proposal at the moment, which will come to this planning committee in due course. It's the largest solar farm in Scotland, as I understand it, and it's going to the side of towards Methven from Tivermore. If you're on the road, it's on the left-hand side, Kinnell Park.
Mr. Wood, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I call in Ms. Gee, who is agent on behalf of the applicant, is on the telephone. You might have to press *6 to unmute. Are you there, Ms. Gee?
Hello, can you hear me?
Good morning, loud and clear.
Good stuff. Thank you very much.
Okay. You are acting on behalf of the applicant. You have 5 minutes for your deputation. Whenever you're ready to start, I'll start the clock.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address the committee this morning in relation to this planning application. My name is Rachel G and I'm agent to the planning application, and I'm here today on behalf of the applicant. I've progressed the subject planning application from submission and had regular dialogue and meetings with the relevant planning officer, Mr. Atkins, together with a number of statutory consultees regarding the proposed development. Mr. Payton has identified the 3 reasons for refusal, but in summary, they relate to the proposal will result in impact on the character and landscape setting of the Greenbelt, no operational need for essential infrastructure on this part of the Greenbelt, and the development will visually impact and erode the local landscape character. I've read the committee report and wish to raise a number of relevant points and respectfully ask the committee to consider these issues in the determination of the subject application. I would firstly like to highlight the socio-economic benefits of the proposed development. Notably, the officer's report highlights the lack of information relating to this matter. However, information on the benefits has been or was provided via supporting information. The benefits are the usual derived from battery storage developments and include direct employment in the construction phase, direct employment through the operational and decommissioning phases, job creation in the supply chain and related services, the generation of 50 megawatt power, which is enough to power 100,000 homes for 1 hour, fulfill a critical function in the supporting transition to net zero. It provides up to £250,000 per year in business rates for the project's lifespan of 40 years, and will provide the provision of 5 optic connections to the local area. I would now like to address the matters concerning site identification process undertaken by the application. An alternative site assessment report was submitted in support of the subject planning application. The report identifies the processes and alternative sites considered for the proposed development. In summary, the site assessment focused on a 3-kilometre radius from the point of connection from the Boroughmuir substation. The site assessment considered various environmental and landscape heritage constraints, together with site access, topography, flooding, and other LDP issues. It also required a site to be 10,000 square metres and at least 150 metres from the residential properties. A total of 7 sites were identified, with the majority being located in the Perth Greenbelt. For various reasons, including the availability of land, 6 sites fell away from further consideration. The alternative site assessment demonstrates there was limited sites suitable for the battery storage development within the search area. It confirms the application site offers the most appropriate and viable location for the proposed development, albeit in the Greenbelt. It also confirms the site is deliverable in terms of landover agreement. From the site assessment process, it can be concluded that the proposed site offers the only opportunity for battery storage development within the identified search area. A further issue that I wish to highlight is the absence of reference to the Scottish Government's energy policies and energy strategy within the committee report. These provide the Scottish Government's commitment to reducing emissions and are central in the determination of any planning application for renewable energy development. In summary, the documents are the draft Scottish Energy Strategy and Just Transition Plan 2023, which signals strong support from the Scottish Government for battery storage facilities. The Climate Change Plan, which sets out the Government's pathway and highlights that battery storage is one technology that will achieve Scotland's contribution to the climate change by 2045. And finally, National Planning Framework 4, NPF4, which emphasises the need for strategic renewable electricity generation and transmission infrastructure. Taken together, these Scottish Government policies make it clear that energy storage is a priority of the Scottish Government. This matter in itself should be afforded significant weight in the consideration of the proposed development. Following from this, I would respectively direct the councillors to NPF4's energy policy, Policy 11, which establishes the Scottish Government's intention to encourage, promote and facilitate all forms of renewable energy. Policy 11 is the primary policy for renewable development proposals.
Ms. Gee, I'm going to have to interrupt you. That's your deputation time up, I'm afraid.
Oh,
are you
okay.
willing to take questions from members?
Yes, I will do.
If you give us a moment until we populate the chat. Oh, Councillor Allen, your first question.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you, Ms. Gee, for your deputation there.
Sorry,
two quick questions, really. One of the things that you mentioned in your deputation was that there would be jobs created as a result of this. Can you tell me how many jobs would be created and how many local people would be qualified to do them? Thank you.
I can't at this stage, but would be happy to provide that information if the application is continued. It's really up to the provider that that estimates the jobs, but I can confirm that it will be taken from a local labour supply force.
Councillor James.
Sorry, couldn't find the unmute there, Convener. Thank you for your deputation, Ms. Gee. You mentioned there that you looked at several sites and this was the only suitable one which met your needs. Do you therefore agree that it's just because it's the only one suitable that it's worth destroying a green belt and beautiful countryside? Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. James. My deputation was going to come on to advise, and it has been made clear in the committee report that the landscape impact and visual impact of the proposed development on the surrounding environment has been assessed by our client's appointed landscape consultant, and a landscape and visual assessment has been submitted in support of the proposed development. That assessment was undertaken in compliance with the industry standard for landscape and visual impact assessments, and it concluded that the proposal would have moderate impact on the surrounding landscape character, and also through mitigation measures the proposal would have moderate impact on the visual impact of the surrounding development. A greenbelt assessment was also undertaken to assess the site's contribution to the Perth greenbelt, and that was also undertaken by the appointed landscape consultant, which considered or which concluded that the site made little contribution to the overall function of the Perth greenbelt, which is intended to arrest urban sprawl. In that respect, given the proposed mitigation measures and given the acceptance by MPF for Policy 11 that renewable development will have some landscape and visual impact on the surrounding environment, and also MPF for Policy 11 does advise that if those impacts are considered to be localized impacts, that such impacts will be acceptable. It is on this basis that the site is considered suitable for the proposed battery storage development.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and good morning. And thank you for your deputation. You may have heard the deputation prior to your own this morning, where it was asserted that no consultation had been conducted with the 9 nearest residential property owners, and also that no noise assessments were done at any of these properties to the knowledge of the deputation. How do you respond to that?
Good morning, Mr. Drysdale. I wasn't personally involved, or my company Lampro wasn't personally involved with the pre-application process, so I cannot comment on letters being not being received. But as I understand from the consultant undertook the pre-app consultation, there were letters sent out. I can only apologise if they weren't received by the consultants, and I'm happy to look into that if the application, and provide you with their reasoning if the application is continued. In terms of the noise impact assessment, the noise impact assessment was undertaken by a well-reputed noise consultant that undertake impact assessments for battery storage throughout the country and support a number of battery storage and other renewable type developments with noise impact assessments. They will have undertaken noise readings from both the site and from the nearest possible public accessible location, which is usually adjacent but not within the residential properties that are close by to the site. And also they will have national standards that they draw upon for residential properties with and without windows open. So they draw from that information base as well. And thereafter they undertake the noise assessment and recommend if there's any mitigation required.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you, Ms. Gee, for your presentation. This also relates similar to Councillor Drysdale about the previous comments. Have you any comments related to the flood risk that's been identified both in the officer's report and by some of the other contributors? Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Harvey, good morning. This the flood risk issue has been discussed and was a particular issue in relation to this subject application. A flood assessment and drainage strategy was submitted with the original planning application, but following consultation with SEPA, a hydraulic flood assessment was requested to be undertaken, and that was undertaken by the applicant and was submitted in support of the planning application. It did show that the site and surrounding lands do suffer from flooding, and thereafter a flood storage proposal was formulated and submitted to SEPA to arrest their concerns, and SEPA approved the flood storage proposals. That flood storage proposals is now subject to a separate planning application, which is with Perth and Kinross Council, and that essentially minorly regrades the surrounding land to form flood storage ponds within the surrounding area. So that will counteract any storage, any flooding of the subject planning application site and also the surrounding area.
Ms. Gee, there's no further questions. Thank you for your time. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Convener. One of the deputations mentioned the communication from the planning department. Can you tell us how local residents are notified and what the rules are?
Certainly. So in terms of the, excuse me, for the planning application itself, so when the planning application is submitted to us and validated, we will take a 20-metre buffer from the application red line boundary and write to the people within that buffer. Where we can't identify someone within that buffer, we do a press advert as well. Now, for this site, the neighbour notification, the council wouldn't have had any statutory requirement to send letters to the properties because they're out with the 20 metres. Now, what was alluded to in the deputations was that they hadn't received letters from the developer, not from the council. So as part of the pre-application process for a major, they have to show they've done community consultation, listened to the community, taken on board their views, and they have to submit a statement to us with the application showing how they've considered those views. So the deputation you heard was that they haven't received letters from the developer, not from the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, thanks, Convener. Mr. Panton, I'm looking at the land itself, agricultural land. It says part 3.1, part 3.2. Appreciate the difference, but the land at the moment presumably can grow. Is used for growing food, I presume, is at the moment?
Yes, the land at this moment in time is capable for food production.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Panton. A couple of questions, actually, both relating to flood things, but I'll ask them jointly because they're related. Firstly, the comment that was made by the applicant regarding the kind of, what was it, hydraulic flood assessment. You've obviously seen it. I'd like your views on that. And secondly, she mentioned additional flood arrangements. Looking at this drawing, can you give us a rough idea of where these flood basins are going to be? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey, certainly. So first of all, it's worth noting the site is at flood risk and they have provided lots of survey work and alternative measures. Now, our flood team in SEPA have looked at that and we are satisfied that what they're proposing in terms of mitigation and compensation stuff is actually appropriate and can deal with the flooding issue. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that the principle of developing a flood risk site is inappropriate. So reason 2 for refusal is in relation to that because they've not demonstrated that there's actually an operational need to develop this flood risk site. So whilst they might be able to mitigate the flood risk, it's the principle of developing a flood risk site that's the issue for us. In regards to where it is, appreciate the members online might not be able to see this, but to the right of the image is where it's proposed. But like I say, that proposal in itself is generally okay, but it's the principle of developing a flood risk site when there's no identified operational need that's the issue, rather than the flooding itself.
Yeah, maybe just to add something to that, Councillor Harvey, that the policy 22 within NPF4 seeks to avoid developing any areas that are at risk of flooding. So the principle is you should not develop these areas unless it's absolutely essential and there are no other options. So that's when it goes into the essential infrastructure, and that for operational reasons of those essential infrastructure projects, that it must be developed there and nowhere else that is not at risk of flooding. I think the report sets out that the connection to the substation is an important factor, and we are 2.5 kilometres from that. And if you quickly look at SEPA flood mapping, for example, the majority of the land between the site and the substation, and then I would imagine there's significant buffers in relation to that, is not at flood risk. So we are questioning why it is essential that this site, 2.5 kilometres from the substation, which is at risk of flooding, should be developed and mitigations put in to deal with that flood risk, when the whole principle should be you should not be developing these areas at all unless it is absolutely essential.
Okay, thanks. That's clear.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Yeah, I will ask a question, if I may. You're jumping the gun, Councillor Illingworth. I'll ask the question. Normally when we receive applications of this sort, they're quite close to the substation. This one's 2.5 kilometres away. I don't know if you really can answer this. Would that affect the power outage or the amount of power that they can receive on that?
No, it wouldn't affect power outage, but it would mean that there's associated infrastructure such as pylons or underground cabling and things like that, but it won't affect the power outage.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Illingworth.
Apologies for jumping the gun. Yeah, this is in my ward. It's an area I know well, having had lots of challenges with the crossroads at Tibblemore, and so both Councillor Frank Smith and myself attended the consultations, and neither of us were impressed by the impact it would have on the green belt and on the local ability. We're also concerned about the flood risks and also the infrastructure being 2.5 miles from Boroughmuir substation. So I would be happy to move that we refuse permission for this.
Thank you. Councillor James, your second.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I mean, it's refreshing, to be honest. The report by Mr. Atkins and Mr. Panton. It's nice to see that just because it's an eco project and energy storage, that we can actually refuse it. You know, we're lucky to live in a beautiful county, and we're under siege from these energy storage and energy production. In all honesty, it's just we're actually destroying the green countryside for green energy. It does make sense. So the report as it stands is brilliant, and I back up everything that Councillor Illingworth said. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if there is an amendment? No amendment. Does committee have any comments on the report? Councillor Braun.
Yep, thanks, convener. Yes, I would have supported this. I've got a chance. My fingers have worked fast enough. I would have got a motion to refuse. But I think the important factor here is obviously we need renewable energy. Obviously, we have to have storage for it, but we just can't plonk these things in anywhere and everywhere. And I think there's another danger here. Obviously, we want to have energy security, but we also want food security. And there's a danger here if we go on too far, we'll lose all our land, agricultural land, that we can use for growing food. So we have to be very careful here and get the right balance. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Frampton, you have a comment?
I do. I want to thank the officers for a well-written report. I agree entirely with what Councillor Illingworth has just said, that the report should be refused based on all the reasons that has already been spoken about. So it's just to say I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Frampton. Okay then, so in the light there's no amendment, planning permission is therefore refused in line with the report of handling. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to the next item, which is 512, which is the erection of office building, workshop, yard, related infrastructure, landscaping, and associated development matters specified in conditions 1X to 3, 4, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 17, approval of matters specified in conditions of 210158 / IPM, land 150 metres south of Target House, Rothenfield, Environment, Industrial Estate, Perth. Oof. And introduce the report as Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. That was a lot for you to read out there. So as stated, the next major application on the agenda today is an approval of matters application for a new office building, workshop and yard at Environment, Perth, for which we are recommending approval. The site is allocated in the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2 and also benefits from planning permission in principle. Members should note that there have been no public objections and the application is only before you today as it constitutes a major development. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Before doing so, I would remind members that an update was circulated regarding this application in relation to the update of Condition 5. So on the screen, we can see the location of the site. The site is to the north of the A9 at Environment Industrial Estate and is currently in agricultural use, measuring approximately 1.69 hectares. Next slide, please. This plan shows the extent of the planning permission in principle that was granted in January 2021. The proposal before you today is located within this site. Members are also reminded that the entirety of the site is covered by an allocation in the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan with the designation known as E38. The proposal before you today is considered to be in full compliance with the site allocation and the planning permission in principle. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed site plan. The office building, landscaping and car park is to the northern part of the site, the workshop to the central area and the yard to the south. The site will connect to an extended road network which has already been approved and benefits from planning permission. Next slide, please. We now have the elevations for the proposed office building. As seen, the building is 2 stories in nature and the south elevation will be largely glazed, as will the north, albeit to a lesser extent. Stone feature panels are proposed on the north, south and west elevations and the remaining finishing materials will comprise of off-white render for the base course and walls with green vertical cladding to the upper level and aluminium clad windows finished in grey. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed workshop building. It will have a footprint measuring approximately 617 square metres and will have a shallow pitched roof. Finishing materials will comprise of grey concrete block for the base course with insulated profiled metal sheeting, finished in green for the walls and roof. Next slide, please. We now move on to a series of recent photographs taken from my site visit. The first image shows the existing SSE building which is immediately adjacent to the site. This building is much larger than those proposed. Next image, please. This next photograph shows the route of the new access road which will be formed, denoted by the yellow arrow. Next image, please. This photograph now shows the site in question. The A9 is beyond the site before the trees you can see. Final image, please. This final photograph shows the site, denoted by the pink arrow, when viewed from the newly completed laid path as part of Phase 1 of the Perth Transport Futures project. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Can I ask members if they have any questions on this report? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Just a very quick one. I know the plan shows a way away, but there's the double dikes to travel the site just on the other side of the Ruthenfield Road, near the roundabout anyway. Is there any concerns about carrying noise and dust. I appreciate from the plan, the first plan you showed, it seems a fair distance away, but if the wind's in the right direction, noise, dust can travel. So do we have any concerns about that?
And we've no concerns if it's suitably managed, and we've recommended conditional control to ensure that it is suitably managed.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Then can I ask for a motion? Councillor James.
Only because nobody else was going to. Again, convener, another good report coming forward, and it's nice to see the environment actually expanding the industrial estate. It means that businesses are still wanting to come to Perth, and I'm very supportive of that. So happy with the report to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you want a second?
Yes, just happy to second on that one, convener.
Thank you. Can I ask, is there an amendment? No amendment. Can I ask if committee have any comments on the report? No comments. Therefore, planning permission is granted in line with the Port of Handling with the condition 5 amendment. Thank you. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break at the moment. Just we've got 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay, folks, start on the next application. It's okay. He'll be fine. It's only introducing the 513, which is the erection of 41 dwelling houses, landscaping and associated works, change of house type plots 15 to 28 and 73 to 99 of planning permission 19-01130 AMM, allocated site H30 at land at Stanley Village, H30 Stanley, Perth, and to introduce a report is Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. So as stated, the next major application on the agenda today is for changes of house types at the Muir Homes development in Stanley, known as the Deer Pines. It is indicated that the changes of house types are required due to changing economic conditions and market demand. We are recommending approval today, and like the last application before you, there are no public objections to this application, and this is only before you today because it constitutes a major development. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. On the screen, you can see the location of the site to the south of Stanley and to the west of the B9099. Construction work has already commenced on the remainder of the site, so it is no longer in use as an agricultural field. Next slide, please. Here we have an extract from the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2, showing that the site is allocated for housing as Site H30. Members should be aware that there is a requirement for this housing site allocation to contribute towards a new Stanley Sports Hub in partnership with the Council and the Stanley Development Trust. This has already been secured via a Section 75 legal agreement and is not proposed to be altered as part of this application today. As such, the developer will still be required to contribute towards this facility. Next slide, please. This plan shows the layouts and house types of what has already been approved. The scheme is for 183 dwelling houses and 4 flats. Your attention is drawn towards the general arrangement of the bottom left section of the site. Next slide, please. This plan now shows the changes that are proposed as part of this application. As seen, the changes are relatively minor to that which have already been approved and thus are considered acceptable. The scheme will result in the reduction of one single plot, known as Plot 100. Next slide, please. Here we can see the area to be changed in further detail. In summary, the revisions result in the loss of a single plot, as already stated, the replacement of 2-storey units with 10 bungalows, detached garages will be introduced, Plot 96 will step out slightly further, and alterations to visitor parking arrangements will occur. A comprehensive list of the changes can be found in paragraph 43 of the reports before you. Next slide, please. Here we can see a standard proposed elevation. The house styles and material choices are consistent to what has already been approved and will not appear out of place as the site develops. I will now take members through a series of recent photographs to give a better understanding of context. This first image is a drone photograph showing the completed section of the site and the new junction onto the B9099. The River Tay can be seen just beyond the houses to the top of the image. Next image, please. This next drone photograph shows the site when looking west. The red star denotes the approximate area of the part of the site where these changes are proposed. Next image, please. This photograph shows the newly completed junction on the B9099. This upgraded junction was a planning requirement of the original application. Next slide, please. This final photograph shows the existing construction site where the changes of house types will occur beyond. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Can I ask if members have any questions for officers? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. That seems to be my day today. First of all, it's a general question for Mr. Panton, because this has come up in previous cases about approval of master plans. Is this a living example why we don't approve a master plan at the beginning?
Not so much, because this was a detailed permission that's been seeking to change. So what the developer came up with as part of their detail, due to market conditions and changing economic climate, when they've started selling properties, they've realised some properties need a switch. So that's why they've applied for this application. The master plan's more relevant when it's an in principle and we're looking at the detailing forthcoming. But for this one, that's not so applicable because we're changing an already detailed scheme.
And the other question was to do with EV charging. Looking at the plan as best I could on my screen, it looks like they're installing chargers on each house. But in the visitor parking, is there going to be any sort of infrastructure there for charging?
Caroline, can you answer that?
Good morning. Thank you for the question. No, there will not be. We are not aware of any plans, but that would be at the developer's discretion and in accordance with building standards.
Yeah, just to maybe to give some reminder that the building regulations now require that EV charging points form part of new house builds, but not for visitor parking and things like that.
Okay, any further questions? No further questions. And can I ask for a motion? Councillor Cuthbert, you put in a motion about half an hour ago.
You have to move quick here to beat Councillor Illingworth, so I thought I'd get in quickly. I had a look at the site on Sunday, and I like what I see, and I think the proposals actually improve the site further, so I'm more than happy to move the paper as stands.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. And Councillor Allen, you wish to second?
Convener, happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's any amendment? No amendment. I see Councillor Bailey McLaren, you want to comment? Any other comments, please put it in the chat.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, just a couple of brief comments. Delighted that the developer is reacting to the asks of the potential purchasers, and it's come forward with these changes. So that's heartening. And also, secondly, the commitment to the Stanley Sports Hub. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James, you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, again, very briefly, Convener, like Bailey McLaren, councillor for this ward, and it is nice to see this adapting to demand. And actually, it's refreshing to see one building lost, because they're normally trying to squeeze 10 more in, but being pleasantly surprised by this development. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor James. In light of the no amendment, planning permission is therefore granted in line with the report of handling. Thank you. Okay, we move swiftly on to item 514, which is a section 42 application to amend condition 12, the ECOW of 22.02231 FLM at Shindur Ferrell Hill Wood Braco. And to introduce the report is Mr. Panton.
Thank you, convener. So the final major application on the agenda today is a section 42 application to vary a condition of an already consented scheme. The variation seeks to change the requirement from weekly visits from the Environmental Clerk of Works to fortnightly visits, in addition to rewording that the Environmental Clerks of Works is in post from the subsequent restoration of the proposed development to the post-construction site restoration. The changes to this condition will still require an Environmental Clerks of Works to be on site regularly, and we are not concerned at the amendments due to them being so minor. Hence our recommendation to you to approve the application today. Once again, I would point out that no public objections have been received, and the application is only before you today as it constitutes a major development. I'll now take members through a very short presentation to detail the proposals further. On the screen, you can see the location of the site, which is approximately 3.8 kilometres west of Braco and 6.8 kilometres north of Dunblane. The site is approximately 0.7 hectares, and the nearest residential receptor is approximately 1.2 kilometres to the south. Next slide, please. Here we can see the proposed site plan, which has already been granted. No changes to this are proposed as part of this current application, and I'm showing it to you for your reference only. Next slide, please. Here we can see a recent image of the site with the existing substation and pylon network in the distance. Again, no physical alterations are proposed from what has already been granted. Next slide, please. This final image again shows the site, and you can just make out the access track in the foreground. This track is suitable for most vehicles to access the site, and I was able to get here in a small council pool vehicle. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference, although members are reminded that no changes to the approved plans are proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, convener. Just a quick question. Do you know the reason why they wanted to change from weekly to fortnightly?
Yeah, put quite simply, is there's not enough happening on the site each week to warrant a visit. Obviously, this is costing the developer having to pay for an Environmental Clerks of Works coming out, and week to week the differences aren't that big. So fortnightly was considered more appropriate to save the applicant some expense, to save the Environmental Clerk Works, but it'll still achieve what we are seeking for it to achieve.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. I'll not call for a motion this time because I'll just do it myself. I'm quite happy to grant permission for this application. Councillor Allen, do you wish to second?
Happy to second, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any amendment? No amendment. Any comment from the committee? No comment. Therefore, planning permission is granted in line with the report of handling. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to 5.2, which is local applications. And the first local application in front of us is the erection of holiday accommodation apartments, formation of parking area and associated works land east of Burgess Lodge, Kinloch Rannoch, Pitlochry. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you very much, convener, and good morning, members. first local application today relates to a proposal to create a total of 22 apartments ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms in a contemporary property with 4 stories of accommodation within, on land abutting Loch Rannoch adjacent to Burgess Lodge. This application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of a total of 80 objections for a number of wide-ranging reasons as outlined in paragraph 31 of the report. Principally, they were received from owners of adjoining timeshare accommodation, and they relate to design, density and scale, visual amenity, flood risk, road safety, among some others. In this instance, planning permission is sought for a tourism-related development on the site already used for tourism-associated uses and allocated as such within the local development plan, which also indicates that there are opportunities for sustainable economic growth in this location. As outlined in paragraph 40, it's considered that the general principle of the proposal is supported by development plan policy, and as such, consideration is given to the other relevant policies of the development plan. While the existing buildings range from a storage shed to a 1.5-storey boathouse, it's considered that the 4-storey proposal can be accommodated onto the site, which has rising topography beyond, without detriment to the local character nor to existing amenity. With the levels changes, the building would also appear as 2-storey from the north. Turning to technical matters, a construction traffic management plan would be required via condition, as would appropriate cycle parking and car parking. In particular, the issue of flooding has been the most contested, and with particular reference to the unnamed burn to the west of the site, which is culverted at 2 points. SEPA does not consider that this site represents one of the allowed exceptions through MPF 4 and therefore maintain a holding objection on the basis of flood risk. Through additional supporting information, the Council's own flooding team are satisfied with the details proposed, which include flood plans, flood resilient materials, and the mitigation set out in the flood risk assessment. In our opinion, it also represents the same level of flood risk vulnerability. However, despite SEPA's objection, our recommendation is one of approval. However, as per the requirements of legislation, should members agree with the recommendation, then it would be necessary to notify this application to Scottish ministers in order to ascertain if they wish to call in the application or whether they are satisfied that PKC can proceed to determine it. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. First, we have an aerial image showing the location of the site adjacent to Loch Rannoch and its associated hotel and the wider estate. Next slide, please. We now see a closer aerial image which shows the wider tourism allocated at Loch Rannoch. Where the majority of the tourism development lies on the northern side of the B846, there is an element located on the southern side as shown on the bottom left-hand side, where there is a storage building and boathouse as previously referred. Next slide, please. The next image is the proposed site plan, which shows the accommodation block on a west to east alignment adjacent to the road, and the access road leading to the western edge down to the car parking area and associated marina. The plan also illustrates the topography in the area together with the presence of nearby trees. Next slide, please. Here we can see the proposed elevations. It shows the loch facing elevation at the top and the road facing elevation beneath. The external finishing materials would include timber cladding, glazing and anthracite standing seam roofs. Next slide, please. Here we can see the proposed floor plans, which show the varying accommodation types between 1 and 3 bedrooms, with the latter having mezzanine accommodation. The top right shows the modelling of the form of the proposal against the context of the rising topography and timeshare accommodation further up the hillside. Next slide, please. Next, we see some of the visualisations prepared by the applicant from various angles showing the proposal in context, and I will now show members a series of photographs for their information. At the top left is the view northwards from the marina towards the boathouse and storage building. It shows the rising topography and tree cover in the vicinity. The other images show the view southwards onto the loch and over the existing marina, beside which the parking would be located. Next slide, please. These final images show the view westwards, together with the respective visibility displays with the B846 east and west. The final photograph, bottom right, is in the vicinity of where the culvert passes adjacent to the site. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I'll leave you with the site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We do have a deputation on this item, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputation procedure.
Thank you, convener. Can I call on Mr. Patty? Mr. Patty, I'm sure you're aware that you've got 5 minutes for your deputation. And I'll start the clock when you feel comfortable to start, and I'll give you a prompt with a minute to go. And you're on time.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Nicholas Patty, representing Lochrannoch Estate. Thank you for letting me attend the committee meeting today. We're happy with the planning officer's recommendation and appreciate that the next steps rest with the Scottish Government. However, I would like to thank the local officers for their support and the pragmatic approach taken, given that SEPA have a view and the Council's flood team have another. Lochrannoch Estate bought the property from McDonald Hotels in July 2020, when it was closed and in substantial disrepair. We've now invested around £7 million in the estate, adding a spa and a range of other facilities, leisure facilities, and taken the hotel from a tired and barely functioning 3 stars to an accredited 4-star silver stars with the AA and a rosetted restaurant. We employ 2.5 times as many full-time staff as the previous owners, with approximately 55 full-time staff present. However, whilst the business has now stabilised, we have only just in the past 12 months achieved a small operating profit. And the scale of the 52-bedroom hotel at the heart of this is insufficient to support the wide range of facilities and our ambitions for further development, for further leisure facilities, and for the woodland pods and the renovation of Rannoch Country Store and Post Office, which we have current planning permissions for. Hence, the application before you today is to add 20 holiday apartments to be rented as part of the hotel operations to achieve a critical mass that should enable us to support the viability of the business and continued investment in Kinloch Rannoch. I have to say it's not that easy to make an economic success of a heavily invested hotel in a remote Highland location, and it's worth noting that the one local competitor, the Dunalister Hotel, is in receivership, and its future as a hotel is unknown. I'm most grateful for your consideration of our application, and I'll be very happy to address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patty. Members, could you populate the chat function if you have any questions? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you, Mr. Patty, for your representation. It was short and succinct. Well done, and thank you for that. There's a number of objections which I'm sure you're aware of, and quite a few of them are about the visual amenity. Do you want to just talk about that for me, please?
Yes, the site for this development is already occupied by buildings boat stores, squash courts, and storage areas. There's a limited change to that. We're working on the same footprint as the existing buildings. The proposed apartments are slightly higher than the the existing, but we've taken that into consideration and provided a multi-gabled roof outline that will not impede the view from the timeshare lodges, which are further up the hill. You'll see that they're at a much higher elevation and won't cause any issue to their view of the loch.
Mr. Patty, there's no further questions. You're free to go. There's always one. Councillor Braun.
Thanks. Reading some of the objections online, they talked about loss of facilities. You mentioned squash courts and whatever, but in your deputation, you mentioned a spa and other facilities. So have some of those facilities they talk about squash courts, has that moved into your new facilities, or are they actually going to lose these?
Yes, the principal facilities that are down there are a fitness centre that we installed that will be moved. The marina will remain, and we will, as a separate application, create a clubhouse by the marina to accommodate the water sports. So there will be no reduction in the facilities that are provided, and indeed we're looking to create more facilities.
Mr. Patty, for the second time, I think there's no questions. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Convener, there's no further deputations. I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. It's just a question about the visual amenity and the objections that have come in from the upper levels on the hill, if you like. We did get a number of visuals, Paul, and I just wondered, did you get a visual from the top? It would have been helpful to have had one within the photographs, but we didn't get one. Just to get your own comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Obviously, they were the ones that were provided to us by the applicant. We felt that we had sufficient information on the basis of those, together with the officer's site visit to it. Obviously, as outlined in the presentation, the site levels do increase quite significantly as you rise up from the loch itself. The loss of a private view from individual properties isn't a material planning consideration, notwithstanding. Obviously, I did outline that the scale of the properties is obviously up to 4 stories to the loch side, 2 stories to the road level to the B846. So a lot of the properties that are then located further up the slopes have actually got views out and across and over the roofscape of the proposals. So there's no concerns from a perspective of impacts on loss of light or overshadowing examples. So we're satisfied with the detail that's been proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to dig in a wee bit more to the kind of disagreement on the flooding issue between SEPA and yourselves. I know that area quite well as well, and the burn I think they're referring to is actually quite far away from there, but I just wonder if you could give us a wee bit more detail. Thanks.
So there's kind of twofold aspects. There's obviously water from the loch aspect, and then there's also the impacts of the culverted burn just to the west of the site as well. From SEPA's perspective, they've looked at it and they don't consider that it's the same level of vulnerability overall for the use that's proposed. Our stance does not concur with SEPA in that regard. We consider that it does form part of the existing tourism offering on the site under the ownership of the applicant. It might not well be tourist accommodation in terms of sleeping accommodation that's on that part of the site, but it's still part of their offering. So that's where our kind of stances differ, and the flooding team obviously take the stance that they're completely satisfied with the updated information that's been received. But because SEPA are sticking to their guns, there is that requirement to notify to Scottish ministers.
Just to follow up then, so it's a kind of classification type of issue to some extent. Right, okay, thanks. Oops.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Braun. Oh, no, Councillor James, sorry. Apologies, Councillor James.
No problem, convener. Paul, great report. Thanks very much. I just noticed in the representations that the last one on page 135 was impact on private water supply. There's been no objections from Scottish Water, so I'm just wondering what is this using a private supply, or are they connecting to the mains? Thank you.
I must admit, Councillor James, I wasn't quite expecting that question, so I'd need to just double check just now, so I may well come back to you on that one if that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Come back to that one. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. I'm following on with, I think, from Councillor Harvey's question, and this is obviously the fact that we have a statutory body which is objecting to the application. We're obviously looking at it from a different point of view. I suppose my point is, do we normally go against the statutory body in this way? And the second part is, obviously this is going to go up through, if we approve it, it's going to go through a long procedure going through Scottish ministers. Are we sure that we've got a strong enough case to go through this, I suppose, to warrant all this work?
Thank you very much, Councillor Braun. It's not entirely unusual. There will be instances, whether it be SEPA, whether it be Nature Scot, whether it be Transport Scotland, for example, that we will end up in a situation that we've got a balance and a judgment to make on a particular proposal. In this instance, we feel there's considerable merit in supporting the proposal. Our own flood colleagues are satisfied with the information that's been provided. We have had 2 or 3 examples probably within the past year where we have had a similar example, one of which was at Broxton. We've had another one at Woodlands Road as well, and also the Two Sisters group as well, as Mr. Panton's just correctly advised. So it's not uncommon, and it all comes down to the scale and type of development proposed. So we're quite satisfied that we're taking the right approach in this instance. It doesn't necessarily have to take as long as you might otherwise think. Some proposals are a lot more straightforward for the ministers to consider.
I think again, it's as Mr. Williamson says, not necessarily a lot of work. We just need to refer it up, and then the work sits with Scottish ministers, and they will take as long as they think is necessary. It can be very quickly. I think the initial period is within 28 days, unless they ask for an extension. But we do have another scheme that's been referred to them at the minute that's been with them for almost a year now. So I wouldn't like to apply a timeline to it, but in this case, and I think paragraph 65, 66 and others refer to it, it's more or less a difference in the view of interpretation in relation to policy, and we feel that the proposal is not in conflict with policy 22 for the reasons that we set out. However, SEPA have a different view, and we've just not been able to bridge that gap despite multiple back and forths. So we feel it's time to move forward.
Thank you. I have a question. In paragraph 78, it talks about the blanket ancient woodland zoning. The whole site sits within that. It says that within the area there's been some disturbance. Do we know what type of disturbance that has been? And just could you answer that firstly, please, Paul?
Yeah, certainly in this instance, and I think it was evident from the kind of aerial photo that was shared near the start of the presentation, you can see that there is extensive woodland cover that surrounds the hills around the Lochranach Hotel, etc. In the vicinity of this application site itself, there has been significant clearance to form the marina at points over time, and obviously there have been elements there where the trees that are on site are far more modern in comparison. The question would be as to whether it's been continually wooded since 1750, I think, is the relevant date. Obviously, we are looking at a very small number of trees that would be affected in this instance, and that the kind of economic benefits of the proposal are fine, but we don't consider that it's actually ancient woodland in this instance.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add, I've now had the opportunity to investigate Councillor James's query in respect to private water, and we have had a response from the private water team, and we do also have condition 6, which would be applicable to requiring further information to be submitted in respect of safeguarding the continued operation of existing and the proposed supply.
Thank you for that. Do we have any further questions? No further questions? Therefore, can I ask for a motion? Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Got to be quick on this today. In changing and challenging economic times for businesses, and particularly for businesses in rural locations to remain viable, it's an important factor, as was outlined by Mr. Patty. And the applicant has demonstrated a commitment to the area and the estate by way of significant financial investment to this point. This application would see further intent. So therefore, I'm happy to support this application and recommend it for approval in line with officers' recommendations and conditions set out in our papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James, you wish the second?
More than happy to second this one, convener. Great location. Nice to see a business expanding and doing well. And I think the impact, as our officers have said, is minimal. I like it. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I ask if there's an amendment? No amendment. Does committee have any comment on the report? Comment. Therefore, planning permission is granted in line with the report of handling. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to 522, which is the erection of a retail unit class 1A, formation of vehicle access, parking area, landscaping and associated works at land 75 metres north of 288 Strathday Road, Crieff Road, Perth. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you again, convener. The next local application relates to the proposal to erect a Class 1A retail unit comprising 1,949 square metres of gross internal area, together with 103 car parking spaces at Newton Farm, which lies to the southeast of McDermott Park, close to its junction with the A85 Crieff Road and the A9 slip near the crematorium. This application has been referred to committee today in light of the timeous referral by local members in line with the council's scheme of governance. Notwithstanding, the application was in receipt of a total of 10 representations, all in support of the proposals as outlined in paragraph 52 of the report. One late objection was received on behalf of Tesco, which flagged conflicts with development plan policy. By means of a background to the proposal, as outlined within the report, the site is actually allocated for residential development, H71 for between 72 and 100 homes. The proposal would see the erection of the retail store towards the eastern boundary of the site, with the car parking located to the west. As per the requirements of the local development plan, the applicants have sought to demonstrate that the proposals would not stymie the development of the remainder of the site for a residential development, should such a proposal come forward. However, as stated in paragraph 57, retail proposals must be consistent with the town centre first principle. This essentially means that retail proposals will be supported in existing city, town and local centres and edge of centre areas if they are allocated for new retail development. But they shall not be supported in out of centre locations other than for small scale neighbourhood retail development, which this is not, or in an island or rural area, again, which is not applicable in this instance. As confirmed in paragraph 60, in comparison to the retail proposal at Beheveless for another retail developer, the decision from the Court of Session Judicial Review outlined that a proposal of this scale could not be considered to be small-scale neighbourhood development. As such, cognizance must be given to this as part of the assessment. Furthermore, the 2023 Perth and Kinross Retail Study recommends that the next LDP define such development as comprising no more than 500 square metres gross, with individual retail units measuring no more than 200 square metres gross. This would be to ensure that retail development principally serves local retail needs and is consistent with the principles of 20-minute neighbourhoods. In addition, as stated in paragraph 64, the retail study also outlines that there's no capacity or need for additional convenience retail floor space within Perth and more widely Perth and Kinross as a whole. The projections for physical retail space are not positive due to contraction and a number of other factors such as online shopping. While the applicant considers that there is an inherent need for a discount food store, there is no differentiation between retail offerings or operators. As such, it's a consideration that there's a fundamental policy conflict with the development plan. In noting NPF 4 Policy 15 relating to local living in 20-minute neighbourhoods, the intent of the policy is to encourage and promote facilities and the application of place principles and where people can meet the majority of their daily needs within a reasonable distance of their home, preferably by sustainable transportation options. However, it's considered that the table proposal is much larger than that, with a larger catchment area. Notwithstanding these conflicts with the latest retail policy through NPF 4, the allocation for retail usage was resisted by the reporter at the time of the LDP2 examination. There are already considered to be a number of other sites, as outlined within paragraph 76, which would be within a 7-minute drive catchment, thereby providing a range of options. It's also considered that the proposal could divert trade from existing neighbourhood centres, and in particular their anchor convenience stores. Therefore, it's concluded that the proposal is contrary to NPF 4 Policy 28 and LDP Policy 13, as outlined in paragraph 87. In respect of other matters, the proposal is also contrary to allocation H71 for housing. While an indicative layout has been provided to show how the housing aspect could be delivered, it hasn't been supported by a flood risk assessment or a phasing programme. Therefore, there is no guarantee of the delivery of the remainder of the site. There are also issues associated with the retaining features and potential noise implications to future housing. These form the basis of reasons for refusal 4 and 5 respectively. In respect to biodiversity, while reason 3 outlines that further work would be required to fully assess the impacts, it has since transpired that the necessary work was undertaken and not uploaded, and that the impacts would ultimately be acceptable. As such, should members be minded to accept the recommendation of officers, reason 3 would be deleted and reasons 4 and 5 would be renumbered 3 and 4 respectively. In summary, while there be some economic benefits arising from the proposal, both during construction and during operation, there are significant conflicts with development plan policy in a number of areas. While we are conscious of a cost of living crisis, NPF 4 is particularly clear on the criteria for new retail development, and this proposal would simply not comply. Furthermore, in the midst of a housing crisis, the proposal has not demonstrated how the proposal would remain to see the residential element of the wider site out with our control delivered and allow a harmonious relationship between the respective parts would be clearer with a detailed master plan. I now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. First, we have an aerial image showing the location of the site at the corner of the Creef Road and the A85. Next slide, please. We now see a much closer aerial image which shows the site centrally located southeast of McDermott Park beside its associated training pitches. Tesco is located on the left-hand edge beside the A9. Next slide, please. The next image is the proposed site plan, which shows the retail store on a north-south alignment at the eastern edge of the site. The access is taken to the southwest via a new signalised junction with Creef Road. The plan also illustrates the pathway linkages and proposed landscaping of the site. Next slide, please. Here we can see the proposed elevations and partial sections. It shows the main glazed frontage facing south with the shallow monopitch roof. The west facing elevation also gives an indication of the change of levels down towards the housing site to the north. Next slide, please. Here we can see the proposed floor plans showing the main retail floor space in pink, with the back of house elements being in pale blue and green. Next slide, please. Now we see some of the visualisations prepared by the applicant, with the view from the signalised junction towards the west elevation at the top, and then the view from Crieff Road to the south elevation beneath. Next slide, please. Members will now see part of the indicative residential and landscape layout to show how housing could potentially be delivered on the remaining part of the Age 71 allocated site. Next slide, please. And again, this shows the potential wider site in general. However, the applicant has no control over the delivery of the wider site, and there are no live applications under consideration. I'll now show members a series of photographs for context. Next slide, please. At the top left is the view eastward from Crieff Road, close to the position of the signalised junction, with top right showing a similar view from slightly further west. Bottom left is the view westwards from the Crematorium Road, looking back towards the site, while bottom right shows some of the trees near the proposed access road. Next slide, please. Next, we see the view northwards from Crieff Road. The car parking would be in a central position, where the retail store would be located on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. The final image shows the view southwestwards from the Crematorium Road, back over the site towards Crieff Road. It also partially outlines a topographical change across the site, with land falling to the north on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I leave you with the site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson, and we do have deputations on this, so I will now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. We've got a mixture of statements and in-person deputations for this application, and we are going to read the 3 statements first. So first statement is from Councillor Rebick, local member. He's supportive of the application, and his statement is going to be read by Ms. Brown-Clark to the committee.
Thank you. The following is a statement from Councillor John Rebick. As a Ward 11 member, I would like the committee to note my support of this development. A discount retailer would be very welcome, particularly where it sits in the middle of Tulloch and Latham. Both formal and informal engagement with the community has been overwhelmingly positive, and it's important the wishes of the local community are taken into account. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. The second statement is from Mr. Davidson, representing the Bertha Park Residents Community Group, and it's in support of the application, and to be read by Ms. Brown-Clark to the committee.
May I firstly apologise for not being able to attend in person. However, on behalf of the Bertha Park Residents Community Group, I am writing to inform you that this group supports the planning application which has been submitted by Lidl for a new store to be located on the Crieff Road in Perth. We feel that it would be advantageous to the local and wider community who are located on the west side of Perth. In addition to the jobs it will create, we feel that Lidl will offer our residents a more convenient discount supermarket location, increasing their choice of supermarket, along with offering more competitive pricing. It would be a good addition to the amenities on the west side of Perth, whilst also being beneficial for the other communities in West Perthshire, being Methven, Pitcairn Green, Almondbank, etc., negating the need for residents from these areas to go further into town for their shopping. I look forward to hearing the outcome. Thank you.
And the final statement, unfortunately, Mr. Ferguson can't be here in time. Mr. Ferguson is representing Latham for All Community Hub and is support of the application, and a statement to be read by Ms. Brown-Clark to the committee.
Latham for All is an organisation that offers residents of North Perth the opportunity to have their views heard on a range of topics that may impact their community. The recent report published called Love Latham is a collaboration between Wellbeing Alliance Scotland and Perth and Kinross Council. It is in keeping with the Perth and Kinross offer, the Council's commitment to draw on the strengths and assets of individuals and communities and work together so everyone in Perth and Kinross can live life well. The report highlights that the community feedback includes people can't afford good food and we don't have enough cheap local shops. The community only has the Co-op and Tesco to shop from. Both stores are expensive and limiting to those on a tight budget. The Lidl store will allow residents of North Perth to better manage their budgets. If we, as Latham for All, support a person in crisis to buy food with a Perth card, then they can only use the Co-op locally, where they will get only half of what they can get at Lidl. If they are in food crisis, they will not have the bus fare to go into town and back again, where the current store is. We've had over 50 letters of support from community members supporting this store, and we feel it will increase choice and provide better value for money to our community. On top of this, I understand that the planned store will bring over 30 above real living wage jobs, which are clearly needed within North Perth to support financial security.
Thank you, Ms Brown. That brings us to in-person deputations, and could I call on Mr Marshall? Mr Marshall represents Tulloch Net Community Hub and is in support of the application. Mr Marshall, you'll be aware that you've got 5 minutes for your deputation. I'll give you a wee prompt when you've got a minute to go, so I'll start the clock whenever you feel comfortable to start.
Good morning, councillors and fellow representatives. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Tulloch community this morning. My name is Gavin Marshall and I'm a community worker in Tulloch working for a grassroots organisation called Tulloch Net. I'm here to express our strong support for the proposal to bring Lidl store to our area. An investment that would bring real benefits to local people and help address some long-standing challenges. Tulloch is struggling, our play parks are run down, our community centre is not fit for purpose, and there are very few organisations actively working to improve the area. For too long, our community has felt overlooked when it comes to commercial and community investment. I've spoken to many people who want to live, shop and engage with their community locally without constantly having to travel elsewhere. While other areas have seen investment in local initiatives, Tulloch feels left behind, and yet we are a community of over 5,000 people. We have seen plenty of new houses built in recent years, but with little thought given to the infrastructure needed to support those living in them. This lack of investment hasn't just affected us financially, it impacts people's daily lives with fewer choices, higher costs, limited access to fresh food. All these create unnecessary hardships. Bringing a Lidl to the area would send a tangible and powerful message that this community matters and deserves the same opportunities as others. A new Lidl would obviously benefit local employment. Once open, it would provide stable, well-paying jobs for people in our community. As you know, the cost of living crisis is hitting people hard. Families are struggling to make ends meet, and rising food prices are an enormous burden. Many residents have no choice but to shop at the more expensive Co-op or walk further to reach Tesco. Lidl is known for its affordability, offering quality products at prices people can actually afford. This would make an immediate and meaningful difference in the lives of local families, pensioners, and young people trying to get by. More affordable food shouldn't require the travel that it currently does, but in underinvested communities like ours, access to fresh, healthy, and affordable food is limited. By bringing Lidl here, you're not just giving people a place to shop, you're giving them the ability to make healthier choices for their families. Better food options lead to better health outcomes, which benefits everyone. Our hope today is that bureaucracy does not trump the well-being and increased choice of local people, especially in these increasingly uncertain times. This seems like a win-win for us. Lidl wants to invest in our community. The council has an opportunity to deliver something tangible that directly helps local people. To many of us in Tulloch, this just seems like common sense. Lidl isn't just another shop, it's an investment in local jobs, health, affordability, and long-term well-being for our community. Approving this project would be a step towards showing that this council is serious about tackling inequality and making a real difference where it is needed most. I urge you to support this proposal and give our community the opportunities it deserves. But if this proposal is rejected, I sincerely hope Perth and Carnoustie Council will offer alternative plans to invest in Tulloch, ones that will deliver outcomes as beneficial, if not better, than what Lidl is offering. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Are you willing to take questions from members? If members have any questions, please populate the chat box. Councillor Braun will take your first question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your deputation. One of the things in the report, and the other factor I think people consider is, do you feel Lidl's would take business away from Perth Centre? It will affect the Perth Centre. It's in the report here. Obviously, it's a concern that's raised. It would drag customers away from the centre.
I don't know if it would take a business away from the Perth Centre. I guess what I'm here today to do is to advocate for Tulloch community specifically. And I think they would certainly be drawn to the Lidl locally, which is important, and they've expressed that as being important to them. So I couldn't speak fully to where the business will be taken from.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. And Mr. Marshall, thank you for your deputation. Obviously quite emotional there as well. You mentioned at the outset of your deputation there about the dilapidated state of your local community. I mean, I get all the benefits that a Lidl store might do, but what's that going to do for the dilapidated state of your community?
I mentioned the dilapidated state of the community centre as well as recreational spaces. I guess that was leading into the felt underinvestment of the local people in Tulloch and seeing other areas that have seen some investment in them. What something like this could do, or else it certainly would be felt in the community, is people taking notice and taking seriously their livelihoods right now and the conditions that they're currently in day to day, as other people have mentioned, where they have to go and how far they have to go to get affordable, fresh, healthy food. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thanks for the deputation. We've heard powerful testimony from yourself and on by the clerk on behalf of the other deputations today about community support for this proposed development. In terms of yourself and how you come to be here today, can you explain or just clarify for me what level of consultation you and your organisation has undertaken in order to come to the conclusion that you have, and also was there any level of lack of support, any number of people that did not want this development to take place? Thanks.
Yeah, we're a very small organisation. We did a lot of anecdotal surveying. People who came into our community hub, we would ask them. Parents on the school run, we would speak to them too. In terms of numbers, I could only really say 20, 30 people we spoke to. We did a little bit of stuff on Facebook. The Tulloch Community Group has a large Facebook group, and we put some stuff on there. It was all positive on social media. And then anything else we did was in consultation with Lidl themselves, who used our community hub for a drop-in information centre. So nothing official, but it was all the anecdotal evidence that we got was unanimously in favour of the project.
Thank you.
Councillor Braun, your second question.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Verena. This comes back to something you said in your statement. You were talking about there are a lot of residential houses around the site. So what you actually implying, I suppose, that by building this, we are actually creating a 20-minute neighbourhood where people can walk to or cycle to.
Correct. Yes, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Mr. Marshall, there appears to be no further questions. You're free to go. I'm going to call on Mr. Jackson and Mr. Harper on behalf of the applicant. Gentlemen, you stated earlier that you're going to have 10 minutes and it's going to be kind of a blended. Yeah. Okay. I'm sure you're aware that you've got 10 minutes. I'll give you a prompt after when you've got 1 minute to go. So whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock.
Good morning, everybody. I am Ross Jackson, Head of Planning for Lidl in Scotland, and I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak at committee today. And I'm here to present why the proposed Lidl development can be approved by members of the committee. But before I go into the specifics of the application, I would just like to highlight that this is Lidl are a major investor in Scotland through our existing store estate. We've currently got 111 Scottish stores. Our distribution network, our distribution hub in Motherwell is the second biggest in the UK. Also our employees, we've got 3,500 employees in Scotland. And also our supplier base. We have 400 Scottish products coming from about 80 Scottish suppliers. These Scottish suppliers also have the benefit of exporting to the rest of our stores in Europe. We are continuing to grow our presence in Scotland, and I can also confirm that we are, in fact, the fastest growing retailer in Scotland. To provide some context on the specific application, this is our second, this would be our second store in Perth, having been in the town centre since 1994. Now, I would like to just categorically confirm that this is an additional store to our existing trading outlet in Perth town centre. I'll come on to the retail impact later on. Yeah, Perth is viable for 2 stores. We did previously submit an application on this site in April 2022. Following feedback with the planning department and the local community, we withdrew that application and we made positive improvements to it. That included increased pedestrian access, and I note that in the handling report, this is confirmed and acknowledged by the planners. The proposed development would provide much needed high quality products at the lowest possible price. That's kind of the ethos of Lidl. And during the cost of living crisis that we're currently in, this is now more important than ever. We see the store as being a local store, which may serve the needs of the local community in Tulloch, Letham, Hillyland, and also near Dobies at Boroughmuir. The store is within 20 minutes walking distance from all these local communities. As confirmed in the committee report, there are 5 reasons for refusal. I'll take you through each of these in turn, if I may. The first one being retail policy. Second, designation for housing. The third, as confirmed by the planning department, was the ecology bat survey that can now be deleted out of the reasons for refusal if it was approved. Fourth being visual impact of the site, including the housing. And the fifth, the potential noise affecting the future housing. First of all, the retail impact. We have submitted a detailed retail impact assessment, which confirms that there are no adverse impacts on any designated retail centres. We offer a highly discounted retail offer aimed at satisfying a local catchment. We've addressed the sequential test for local neighbourhoods as is required by NPF4, and it will deliver a conveniently located discount facility, increased choice for local residents, and it will ultimately save money for these residents in their grocery shopping. It is expected that trade will come from our own store in the town centre, Aldi, Tesco and Morrison's, all of which we've shown in our retail impact assessment are significantly over trading at present. Reason number 2 for refusal was the housing site. 72 to 110 houses were allocated on the site. Our proposals show that this can be achieved. We've provided an indicative master plan which shows 88 houses, and actually our site only takes up 30% of the overall housing site. We've also spoken to the current landowner who's indicated that they are bringing forward 100 residential units. So there's not going to be any net loss of housing provision from that housing allocation. Reason 3 was the BATs, which I've discussed. Reason 4, visual impacts for the proposal. We have provided a welcoming elevation onto Crieff Road. We've deviated from our standard elevations to improve that, to improve the visual impact. And I know that the visual impact on the housing element was also discussed in the report, but we are not in control of the housing element, and that isn't part of this application. Ultimately, the council will have the ability to discuss the design for that housing once it's brought forward by the landowner. What I can confirm is that our access road will be the access road for any future housing on that site. So our store is actually benefiting the bringing forward that housing site. The highest point of the retaining wall behind the store, which is also described in the report as a reason, is actually screened by the store itself, so you won't see much of it. Over and above this, we've committed to planting the face of the retaining wall, so it will be green, so that will then take away from any perceived impact. Over and above this, we have 48 trees throughout our 2-acre site, which is extensive for us, but we feel that this screens any adverse impact on the environment successfully. The 5th reason would be the potential impact of noise on future housing. We've got 111 stores in Scotland, many of which operate next to housing. The closest and best example I can think to here would be Stirling Weavers Road. It's surrounded by houses on all 4 sides. We've got no issues with noise from our store. I would also say that any new store, considering the building management systems we put in there, are much quieter to our historic stores, such as the one I've described in Weavers Road. I've obviously gone through the reasons for the refusal there, but there are a number of clear tangible benefits that the scheme brings, and it should be noted that these are all material planning considerations. The development will be an investment from Lidl of about £10 million, which will boost the local economy. We will create up to 40 jobs, and Lidl are committed to our entry-level wage being the National Living Wage Foundation threshold. In March 2025, we've just increased that to £12.75 for the entry-level hourly rate. The combined employment creation is in keeping with MPF4 and also Perth and Kinross LDP. The proposal, as I've described, will feature enhanced landscaping and will soften the impact of any development and provide positive and active contribution to the area. The development integrates into the housing allocation and provides the access road that I've described. And the proposal will provide high quality, healthy, affordable food for residents. Any new store will also benefit from any schemes that are currently in place. For instance, our existing store in Perth has donated 25,000 meals through our Feed It Back campaign, and these meals have gone to the local community. As part of Lidl's public consultation process, we asked local residents to complete a survey. 94% of people were supportive for a Lidl store. We've hosted several public consultation events in the local area, such as Tulloch Community Hub, Letham Community Hub, and the newly developed Bertha Park. Local residents in these areas shared that they welcomed the Lidl store on Crieff Road, as it provided them with a cost friendly choices and access to more than one retail food offering. We've shown a strong commitment to opening a store here, and there is a community desire and I believe a community need for a store in this location. On this basis, as I have outlined, there are significant material planning considerations in favour of the proposal. We hope that the Planning Committee can support these considerations and see the benefits that a Lidl store will bring to the local community. I would therefore kindly request that you approve the application at committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Willing to take questions from members? Members, could you populate the chat function? Remind you from the convener's address at the start of the meeting, this is about policy and land use, not about brands. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got two questions. The first one is, you mentioned in your deputation that Perth is viable for 2 stores. Could you maybe expand on that as to, obviously this is a company policy, so could you expand on that for us? Thank you.
So Perth, like town city centre, is viable for 2 stores. As there's more population in surrounding areas, then within Perth and Kinross, there's certain areas that may become viable in the future.
Well, I was just more interested to find out what your company classified as viable. What?
We look for various things, demographics, number of residents is a big one for us. As a company, we've got a much smaller footprint than some of our competitors, so we can fit into the pockets around town centres that aren't currently developed, but then provide a 20-minute neighbourhood for some areas of the town. It gets harder as there's less available land, but because we've got a smaller footprint, we can fit into these areas. Generally, we look for a population or a catchment, I should say, of 20,000 people.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Just a quick question. Could you just define to me what overtrading means?
I can. Just that according to our retail impact assessment, I'll probably pull in Jonathan into this, but that these operators, including ourselves in the town centres, are over trading what we expect from a store of that size. If you like, and Jonathan, you might be able to add to that for me.
Yeah, so as part of our assessment, we'd look at what the benchmark turnover figure is for those stores. So that's what we would be expecting them to be traded at, set against the industry standard for those particular retailers. We've then done our own retail study looking at market evidence within the area itself to then define how these stores are trading in this particular locality. And what that's come back with is a position whereby the existing stores are significantly over trading when set against what you'd expect them to trade at on a benchmark level. Some of them were up to 300% over trading against where you would expect them to be.
So that obviously, a store, ourselves included, is over trading so much. It's difficult for us to keep the store in the best possible environment for customers, whether that be the cleanliness or the environment for the customers, but also the stock on the shelves. So we are finding that ourselves. So hence the reason why we know that there's a viable option for another store.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mr. Jackson. Just really a reiteration, please. I want to hear it again. Will the store in Perth remain open?
Yes, 100%. It's done well for us since 1994. We've got no intention of moving from that location.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks for asking, Convener. Thank you for your invitation. Mr. Harper touched on this, I think, but I just want to clarify it. You said you're looking at £10 million investment in this site. And there's a comments within their report saying, obviously, there's no need for further retail here. So I was just want to clarify, presumably you've done your own investigations. You've talked about overtrading at other stores, but you've done your own investigations that you're going to actually get business here. There's the volume you need to on a return on that investment. Would I be right?
That's definitely right. That level of investment, we've obviously done plenty of background work and surveys to make sure that as a company we wouldn't be investing that level unless we knew that the store was viable for the foreseeable future. And we know, considering we were already trading in the same kind of location and had done since 1994, we know ourselves that a second store is viable.
Bailey McLaren, you have a second question?
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, it was more about the local catchment, local neighbourhoods. Again, you mentioned that in your deputation, you know, and specifically more within relation to the 20-minute neighbourhoods. Could you maybe just talk us through where you have identified these local neighbourhoods to be? Thank you.
Yeah, so much of it is done from a desktop exercise to see where the communities are, but actually we've been consulting with a lot of these communities through this whole process, being Tulloch community, Letham, and most recently Bertha Park. We were there 2 weeks ago giving them an update that we were coming to committee today, and we actually got another 75 letters of support from them at that point. Now, those discussions have indicated to us that our desktop surveys were accurate, and there is a desire and a requirement for people in that area to be able to get to a store within 20 minutes. This site on Creef Road is within a 20-minute walking distance from these locations.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. In terms of the reasons for refusal, the judicial review seems to be played quite a big part in this. How would you respond to the judicial review that happened in Perth with the previous application from, I think it was Oldie?
I am aware of that, but I would have to say this is a standalone application, and I'm aware of the background of that, but the background is not the same as the reasons for refusal in this instance. Do you want to go?
Yeah, add to that, in that particular case, the decision itself relied upon the fact that it was compliant with the 20-minute neighbourhood policy within MPF4. And the point of challenge was around whether it did or did not comply. We're not setting out through our case that we comply with that particular policy element. So in many respects, the issues are different to that case, because we're not relying upon the points that were relied upon within the Aldi case, if that assists.
I think you mentioned that you've done the sequential test. Could you elaborate a bit more on that? Because that's one of the tests that would be looked at, presumably.
Yeah, so through that, we've obviously done an assessment as to whether there was any alternative sites capable of accommodating the development that we're proposing, which we found wasn't to be the case in this particular instance. I don't believe there was disagreement with the council on that particular aspect. In addition to that, we've also done retail impact tests as well, with a view to assessing impacts on both Perth city centre and again the local centres. And through that, again, we've identified that there isn't going to be a significant adverse impact upon those centres. So both of those things, in terms of assessing the planning application in retail terms, are obviously key material considerations in assessing what the harm might be in the event that the proposal is granted. We would say that that's minimal in terms of any harm arising through the retail impact aspect, and that the benefits that the proposal is going to bring very much outweigh any harm that's going to be caused. And therefore there are material considerations in favour of the proposal, which we believe allow it to be supported accordingly.
There's no other questions from members, but I'd like to ask a question. You'll be fully aware that H71 is allocated for housing, and in your deputation you alluded to an indicative master plan. Do you have any say in that, or would you seek to have any say in any future development of H71?
No, we don't. So we have we knew there was a concern there about that policy, so we asked our own designers to come up with a scheme and to show us what it would look like, to make sure that our perceived impact was what we thought. And we showed on our scheme that 88 houses of different sizes could be constructed on that scheme. And as a side to that, we spoke to the landowner, and they've actually said that they are proposing to bring forward 100 houses. The 72 to 110 was the allocation, so we're still within line for that. But to answer your question, again, no, we don't have an input to it. We do have an input to the access road of it, and that will be constructed by us in advance of any housing scheme.
Thank you, gentlemen. There's no further questions. Free to go.
Can the gentleman just wait a second or two? Mr. Fogg wants to clarify something with you.
Mr. Harper, thank you. I listened with interest to what you said in reply to questioning from Mr. Councillor Cuthbert, and in particular, he invited you to comment on the recent judicial review case with which the council was involved. Can I just make sure that I've noted your position correctly, because it might be relevant to the advice I subsequently give to the committee in their determination. I've recorded you saying that your case is not advanced for the same reasons that were before the court in the Aldi application, and that in this instance you're not suggesting that there's a local neighbourhood argument that the council was advancing in making its case that that application accorded with policy 28 of NPF4. Do I therefore, bearing in mind that all applications are the retail policy of NPF4 applies, are you accepting that this does not accord with that policy, but for other material considerations you would like the committee to support the application? Is that your position?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. You're free to go. Thank you. Right, committee, I propose that we break for lunch now for an hour. If we're back here for 1:45. Thank you.